A wealthy man found a young girl crying in the street, drenched by the rain, and took her to his home. Moments later, he was shocked to discover that the girl had his late wife's brooch in her bag. The city streets, filled with the rush of people at the end of the day, throbbed with hectic energy. Among the crowd, a small figure stood out, not because of her speed, but because of the stillness she carried. Mariana, a fragile 8-year-old girl, sat against the cold wall of a tall building. Her large brown eyes, framed by a dirty, thin face, scanned the busy flow of pedestrians. Her black hair, tangled and dull, hung over her narrow shoulders, which were covered by a worn, light coat. Her clothes, a mishmash of old, patched-up rags, hung loosely on her emaciated frame, a result of constant hunger. Her bare, filthy feet, toughened by the rough streets, silently showed the many miles she had walked. Why does no one notice me? Why do they all walk by, acting like I'm just part of the pavement? Can they see me through these rags? Or do they just see another person on the street? Mariana thought, her inner voice filled with a sadness far beyond her years. Her hands, trembling, clutched a piece of stale bread, her only meal of the day, given to her earlier by a kind woman who had passed by. Her stomach ached, but something in her heart stopped her from eating it immediately. She scanned the street, hoping to find someone else who might need it more than she did. That's when she saw a young mother, just as dirty and ragged as she was, holding a crying baby. The woman appeared just as lost and desperate as Mariana felt. Maybe, just maybe, I can make someone smile today, even if I can't smile for myself, Mariana thought, slowly getting to her feet. Her legs were weak, trembling from hunger and exhaustion. Every step was a struggle, and people passed her by without even noticing her presence, as if she were just another shadow on the sidewalk. Finally, she reached the young mother, who looked at her in surprise and hesitation. Without saying a word, Mariana extended the piece of bread to her. The mother paused, her eyes welling with tears, before she gratefully accepted the offering. "Thank you, little one. You're an angel sent from heaven," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Mariana felt warmth in her chest from the kind words. Despite her own hunger, she watched as the mother tore the bread and fed the baby, who stopped crying almost immediately. For a brief moment, Mariana forgot her own pain, lost in the joy of having made a small difference in someone else's life. Even if people ignore me, I can still help someone. I want to be a light, even when I'm surrounded by darkness, she thought, a fragile smile playing on her lips as she remembered her mother and the lessons she had taught her. Suddenly, the sky darkened, as if responding to Mariana's thoughts. Heavy, ominous clouds gathered above, turning the day into an early night. A distant thunderclap rumbled, making Mariana flinch as she hurried to find shelter from the coming storm. "Oh no, where can I go? Where can I hide? It's going to be so cold. And these are the worst nights," Mariana whispered, panic rising in her chest. The rain started to fall, first in scattered drops, then in sheets of water. Mariana ran, her bare feet slipping on the slick pavement, desperately searching for somewhere to take refuge. But all the doors were locked, and every entrance blocked. The crowd around her rushed toward taxis and buildings, leaving her alone on the emptying street. "Please, someone help me. I don't want to be left here. Alone." In the rain, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the storm. "Is there anywhere I can stay until the rain stops?" Mariana cried out, though her voice was almost swallowed by the storm. The rain lashed down on the main street, turning it into a rushing river of umbrellas and sliding cars. Amidst the chaos, Mariana began to sob uncontrollably, unsure where she could find shelter. "Mom, why did you have to leave? Why do I have to be all alone in this big, scary world?" Mariana whispered to herself, her tears mixing with the rain running down her face. In the midst of the confusion on the street, a sleek car moved slowly, its headlights cutting through the downpour like sharp blades. Behind the wheel was Emiliano, a man with a gentle face and an intelligent expression, the kind you'd expect from someone who ran large businesses. He scanned the street mostly out of habit, not expecting anything unusual. Then, his eyes caught something. A small figure stumbling along the sidewalk, looking more like a hurt animal than a child. She was shivering and crying uncontrollably. Emiliano furrowed his brow and instinctively gripped the steering wheel. What's a little girl doing out here in this weather? Should I stop? Or is it some kind of trap? He muttered to himself, unsure of what to do. Emiliano slowed the car even further, his eyes never leaving the girl. She was now practically crawling, her strength nearly gone. She looked up, and their eyes met across the windshield. For a split second, everything seemed to stop. Emiliano felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in her gaze that felt eerily familiar. My God, Emiliano breathed, his voice trembling. Those eyes. They remind me of someone. But who? How is that possible? His heart raced as he tried to figure it out. After a moment, Emiliano made a decision. He steered the car toward the curb, ignoring the frustrated honks of drivers behind him. His hands shook as he unbuckled his seatbelt, but the rain didn't seem to bother him anymore. His attention was completely fixed on the girl, now only a few steps away. Hey, little one, are you okay? Do you need help? What are you doing out here in the rain? Don't you have anywhere to go? Emiliano called out, his voice barely audible over the sound of the storm. Mariana slowly turned around when she heard the voice. Her wide, frightened eyes met Emiliano's, and for a moment, it looked like she might run, the deep fear of strangers almost overwhelming her. But the cold and exhaustion took over, and she took hesitant steps toward the car. No, I don't have a home. Please, sir, I just need a dry place, just until the rain stops. I promise I won't be a burden, she whispered, her voice shaky and faint. Emiliano's heart clenched. The desperation and sadness in her voice hit him hard, like a punch to the gut. Without a second thought, he opened the car door, pausing for just a moment before motioning for her to get in. Come on, get in. You'll catch pneumonia if you stay out there, Emiliano said, trying his best to sound comforting. Mariana hesitated, years of mistrust battling against her overwhelming need for shelter. She took a step forward, then another, until she was finally standing by the car. Emiliano could see how much she was shaking now. Her lips almost blew from the cold. I won't hurt you, I promise. I just want to help, Emiliano said softly. What's your name, little one? Mariana swallowed hard, gathering the courage to speak. Mariana, she whispered. With those words, she climbed into the car, leaving a small puddle of water on the leather seat. Emiliano closed the door and, as the rain continued to fall outside, he looked at her, wondering what had brought her to this point of utter vulnerability. He quickly switched on the heater, glancing at the girl from the corner of his eye. Now that she was closer, the resemblance to someone he was desperately trying to remember was even clearer. His heart raced in his chest, a mix of fear and hope stirring within him. Mariana, Emiliano repeated softly, as though testing the sound of her name. That's a nice name. My name is Emiliano. Do you have any family around here? The girl lowered her gaze, her hands nervously clutching the edge of her soaked shirt. No, sir. I don't have anyone. I'm alone, she replied quietly, biting her lip to keep herself from crying. Emiliano felt a rush of emotions. Compassion, concern, and something else he couldn't quite identify. He studied her face, examining every feature. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her chin. She seemed like a perfect mirror image of someone he was desperately trying to remember. Who does this girl remind me of? Why does she feel so familiar? Is this a sign that I'm meant to protect her? Why do I have this overwhelming instinct to care for her? Emiliano's heart raced, and he shook his head to clear the confusing thoughts. Turning his attention back to Mariana, he saw that she was still shivering despite the warmth from the heater. Her clothes were soaked, her hair dripping wet, and her lips still tinged with blue. Without thinking, he grabbed a soft blanket from the back seat and offered it to her. Here, take this, little one. It'll help you warm up, Emiliano said gently. Mariana hesitated for a moment before wrapping herself in the blanket, almost like a cocoon. Thank you, sir. You're very kind. Most people wouldn't care about me, she murmured, her voice still trembling. Emiliano gave a soft smile, feeling a protective urge surge within him. He started the car, and the windshield wipers fought furiously against the relentless rain. "Well, Mariana, you don't need to thank me. I think we should leave here. You must be hungry. How about we get something to eat? Are you hungry?" Mariana's eyes widened with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "I don't want to bother you, sir. You've already done so much by getting me out of the rain," she replied, nervously biting her lip. Emiliano shook his head firmly. "It's no trouble at all. You need to eat well. I can't imagine how hard it must be living on the streets." As he drove through the wet streets, Emiliano glanced at Mariana. She seemed to be relaxing a little, the warmth of the car and the blanket starting to work their magic. Clearing his throat, he tried to make conversation. "So, Mariana, you said you're alone. How long have you been on the streets?" Mariana curled up a little in her seat, her fingers clutching the edge of the blanket. "I think it's been 3 months, she answered quietly. "Since my mom." Her voice broke and she swallowed hard. "Since my mom left." Emiliano's heart tightened when he heard those words. He gripped the steering wheel more tightly, trying not to stop the car and hold the girl in his arms. "I'm really sorry, Mariana. That must have been incredibly hard for you," he said softly. Mariana nodded silently, tears silently falling down her cheeks. "My mom was all I had," she continued, her voice breaking. "She always said that one day she would finally tell me who my dad is." Emiliano's heart skipped a beat. "You don't know your dad?" he asked gently. Mariana shook her head. "Mom said he didn't know about me. He left the country before he knew she was pregnant." Emiliano's chest tightened as he listened to the girl's heartbreaking story. He was about to ask her more when his phone rang, breaking the silence in the car. He glanced at the screen and saw his sister Valeria's name. "It's my sister. I need to take this," he told Mariana, who looked at him curiously before nodding and shrinking back into her seat. Emiliano took a deep breath before answering the call on speakerphone. "Emiliano, where the hell are you? I've been waiting for you for dinner for over an hour." Valeria's sharp voice filled the car. Emiliano frowned, suddenly remembering their dinner plans. "Sorry, Valeria. Something unexpected came up," he replied, glancing at Mariana. "Unexpected? What could be more important than having dinner with your only sister?" Valeria's voice was full of irritation. Emiliano hesitated, unsure how to explain. "It's complicated, Valeria. I found someone who needs help," he said finally. Minutes later, Emiliano's car smoothly rolled into the driveway of his grand mansion, its headlights cutting through the rainy darkness. Mariana, still wrapped in the blanket, stared wide-eyed through the window at the lights illuminating the house's facade. Emiliano parked, turned off the engine, and smiled at Mariana. "Well, we've arrived. This is my home, Mariana. Let's go inside and get you something dry to wear. Okay?" Mariana nodded shyly, still overwhelmed by the grandeur of the place. "It's such a big house. It looks like a fairy tale castle," she whispered as they stepped out of the car. The front door swung open, revealing Valeria, elegantly dressed for dinner. Her face, which had been full of irritation, quickly shifted to surprise when she saw Mariana. Emiliano gently led the girl toward the entrance, feeling the tension build with each step. "Emiliano, what is this?" Valeria demanded, her eyes blazing with anger. "Who is this? Who is she?" Her voice dripped with disdain as she looked Mariana up and down. Emiliano instinctively placed a protective hand on Mariana's shoulder. "Valeria, this is Mariana. I found her on the street, alone in the rain. She needs our help," he explained, his voice firm but cautious. Mariana shivered slightly beneath his hand. "Please, let us inside. We can talk there," Emiliano added. Valeria crossed her arms, blocking the door. "Emiliano, have you lost your mind? You can't just bring a beggar into our home. What if she steals something? What if this is some sort of scheme?" she said sharply. Mariana shrank further, tears welling in her eyes. Emiliano's anger flared. "Enough, Valeria. Mariana is just a frightened, lonely child. She'll stay at least for tonight. "Now, please let us in," he said, raising his voice louder than he had intended. Reluctantly, Valeria stepped aside, allowing Emiliano and Mariana to enter. The inside of the mansion was even more impressive, with its grand foyer and marble staircase. Mariana looked around in awe as Emiliano guided her gently, Valeria following closely behind with a disapproving gaze. As they moved through the house, Mariana's eyes fell on a large framed photograph of a graduation. Dozens of smiling faces filled the picture, all dressed in caps and gowns, but one face in particular caught her attention. In the center of the photo, smiling brightly, was a young woman who looked incredibly familiar. Mariana felt her breath quicken. She looked so much like Mom, but younger, maybe a teenager. It had to be a coincidence, she thought, staring at the photo. The resemblance was uncanny. Same face shape, same warm smile. Without thinking, Mariana reached into her pocket, feeling the familiar shape of the brooch her mother had given her. Her mind raced with questions. How is this possible? Who is this woman? Why does she have the same brooch as Mom? Emiliano noticed her attention on the photo. "Ah, that's my graduation picture. Those were good times," he said casually, unaware of the emotional storm it had stirred in the girl. Mariana merely nodded, unable to find the words. She wanted to ask about the woman in the picture, but something held her back. A deep instinct told her to keep her questions to herself. "Let's go, Mariana. Let's find you something dry to wear." Emiliano's voice gently pulled her back to the present. He guided her away from the photo and toward the stairs. As they climbed the stairs, Mariana cast one last look at the graduation photo, her heart heavy with unanswered questions. "Mom," she thought, "I think I miss you so much. Maybe I'm just seeing things I want to see. I wish you were here with me." With each step, Mariana touched the only thing she had left of her mother, the brooch in her pocket, a tangible link to a past she was only beginning to understand. Minutes later, Mariana sat nervously in one of the chairs in the dining room, feeling out of place in the midst of so much elegance. Emiliano sat at the head of the table, and Valeria took her seat at the opposite end, casting disapproving glances at the girl. Dinner passed in tense silence, broken only by the sound of silverware clinking against fine porcelain plates. Mariana ate her soup quickly, barely tasting the comforting warmth. She could feel Valeria's eyes on her, but she kept her gaze fixed on her plate. "So, Mariana, where are you from? You must have some family somewhere," Valeria finally spoke, her voice sugar-coated but insincere. Mariana swallowed hard, a lump forming in her throat. Emiliano shot a warning look at his sister. "I don't have anyone. My mom. She left a few months ago," Mariana whispered, her voice barely audible. The words seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 burdens. Emiliano's heart ached at the sadness in her voice. Valeria scoffed, her tone sharp. "Your dad? Surely there's someone who can take care of you." "It's not my brother's responsibility to take in every homeless child he finds," she said, her words cutting through the heavy silence. Emiliano shook his head disapprovingly. "Enough, Valeria. Mariana is our guest, and you will treat her with respect," he said firmly. Mariana shrank in her chair, wishing she could vanish. "Guest? Emiliano, you brought a beggar into our house. This is crazy. What if she's part of some scam? What if there are others out there waiting to rob us?" Valeria laughed coldly, gesturing at the windows as though expecting to see a gang of thieves ready to invade. Mariana's tears began to fall, and she dropped her spoon, her appetite gone. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to cause any trouble. I'll leave," she murmured, standing quickly, her legs trembling as she made to leave. Emiliano stood immediately, rushing to stop her. "Mariana, wait. You're not going anywhere. This is your home now, for as long as you need it," he said softly, his hand gently on her shoulder, before he turned to Valeria. "And if anyone is leaving, it won't be you." At that moment, Mariana stumbled, and her small bag, her most treasured possession, slipped from her grasp, falling to the floor. The contents of the small bag scattered across the polished marble floor. Coins rolled across the surface, and an old notebook slid a few inches. Under the lamp's glow, the brooch, her mother's, came to rest at Emiliano's feet. The brooch, now lying on the floor, immediately caught the attention of everyone in the room. Emiliano bent down slowly, picking up the fragile object. His eyes widened in recognition, and a mixture of emotions flashed across his face. "Where did you get this brooch, Mariana?" he asked, his voice trembling. Mariana, still shaken from her near escape, answered with a broken voice, "It belonged to my mom. She gave it to me before she left. It's all I have left of her." Tears filled her eyes as she remembered her mother's final gift. Valeria, who had been watching the scene with growing annoyance, suddenly erupted. "Don't you see what's going on, Emiliano? This girl is obviously manipulating you. She shows up out of nowhere, and now she has a brooch that conveniently looks like something you recognize. I bet she planned all of this. She's probably trying to pass herself off as your lost daughter, just to get her hands on your money." She pointed at Mariana accusingly. Emiliano, still holding the brooch, looked at his sister with a mix of surprise and anger. "How can you say something like that, Valeria? Mariana is just a frightened, lonely child. She's not plotting anything." He turned to Mariana, who was shrinking in fear under Valeria's harsh words. "It's not true, right, Mariana? You're not trying to deceive me, are you?" Before Mariana could reply, Emiliano's phone rang loudly, cutting the tension in the air. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's the office. I need to take this," he said, casting a stern look at Valeria. "Behave, both of you. I'll be back in a minute." With that, he left the room, leaving Mariana and Valeria alone. The silence that followed was deafening. Valeria fixed her gaze on Mariana with a calculating look as the girl fought to keep from trembling. Finally, Valeria spoke, her voice as cold as ice. "Listen carefully, little imposter. I don't know what game you're playing, but it's over. You're leaving now." Before Mariana could protest, Valeria grabbed her arm and pulled her out of the room. But Emiliano said I could stay," Mariana stammered, trying to pull away. Valeria squeezed her arm tighter. "Emiliano isn't here, is he? And by the time he gets back, you'll already be gone." She shoved Mariana into her luxury car and sped off from the mansion. Please take me back. I swear I didn't do anything you're accusing me of. I don't want anyone's money. I haven't done anything wrong." Mariana's voice was a faint whisper. Valeria laughed, a humorless sound, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "To do what? To keep tricking my brother? No, darling. You belong out here with the other beggars." The car came to a sudden stop in a dark, nearly empty street. "Now go," Valeria ordered, her voice sharp. Mariana hesitated, paralyzed by fear. Valeria impatiently opened the passenger door and practically shoved her out. "The beggars don't belong in our family. Stay away from my brother," she said coldly. Then, with those final words, she slammed the door and sped off, leaving Mariana alone in the dark. The sound of the car disappearing into the distance seemed to bring Mariana back to reality. She looked around, panic rising in her chest. Unknown streets stretched out in every direction, dark and threatening. Not knowing where to go, she started walking, her footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. "Emiliano, please find me. Please don't leave me alone again," she thought desperately. The little girl froze for a moment, watching the taillights of Valeria's car vanish into the darkness. The weight of her situation began to press down on her, heavy and suffocating. She was alone again, abandoned in a dangerous, unfamiliar neighborhood. Her first steps were hesitant and almost mechanical, driven by fear and confusion. Her heart pounded in her chest as she moved forward. The dark streets seemed endless, each corner more menacing than the last. "Mom, why am I always alone? Why can't I have a home?" Mariana whispered to herself, tears slipping down her cold cheeks. She instinctively reached for the brooch in her pocket, but it wasn't there. A painful realization hit her. She had lost it back at Emiliano's house. The loss of the brooch, her last tangible link to her mother, made Mariana sob uncontrollably. She stumbled forward, her sobs echoing through the empty streets. The cold wind pierced her soaked clothes, cruelly reminding her of the brief moments of comfort she had felt at Emiliano's house. As she wandered aimlessly, she began to notice the familiar signs of life she had tried to escape: hunched figures sleeping in doorways, the acrid smell of garbage and hopelessness, the vacant eyes of people hurrying by, avoiding all eye contact. I don't want this life anymore. I can't stand it, Mariana thought, panic building in her chest. But where else could she go? Emiliano would likely believe Valeria. Who would believe a street child over a rich, sophisticated woman? The rain began to fall, first in scattered drops, then in thick sheets that blurred her vision. Mariana ran frantically, searching for shelter. Her once clean, dry clothes clung to her, heavy and soaked. She stumbled over uneven pavement and fell to her knees, scraping her skin on the rough concrete. The pain seemed to shatter something inside her, and she began to cry uncontrollably. "What's wrong with me?" she cried to the dark sky, her voice almost lost in the sound of the rain. She looked around, just a small, frightened girl alone in a world that was too big and cruel. The storm intensified, flooding the streets. Mariana could barely see in front of her. Occasional lightning illuminated her path, and during one of these flashes, she saw a narrow alley between two abandoned buildings. Without thinking, she ran toward it, hoping for some kind of shelter from the storm. She huddled against the cold, damp wall, drawing her knees to her chest, trying to hold on to the little warmth she had left. Surrounded by darkness and the deafening sound of rain, Mariana allowed herself to imagine, if only for a moment, what it would have been like if things had been different. If Emiliano had really let her stay at his house, if he had wanted her, if she could have had a home and a family again. But the cold, wet reality of the alley pulled her back to the present. She was alone, abandoned, with no one to turn to. She closed her eyes, exhausted and defeated, while the storm continued to rage around her, mirroring the chaos in her broken heart. Meanwhile, Emiliano hurried back to the dining room after a long business call, his face pale with worry. His eyes scanned the empty room, his heart racing with each passing second. "Mariana," he called out, his voice echoing through the silent house. He ran from room to room, calling their names, until the sound of screeching tires outside caught his attention. "No, no, no. What has she done? Did something happen to Mariana? Please, God, let her be okay," Emiliano murmured as he ran to the window, just in time to see Valeria's car disappearing into the rainy night. He hadn't yet had a chance to think through the implications of the brooch, of what it meant for him and for Mariana. Without hesitation, he grabbed his car keys and rushed to the spot where his sister had dropped Mariana off. The rain pounded against the windshield, making visibility difficult, but Emiliano refused to slow down. His mind was consumed with thoughts of Mariana, imagining the fear she must be feeling. "Hang on, Mariana. I'm coming for you," he thought, gripping the steering wheel tightly. After nearly an hour of frantic searching through the rain-soaked streets, Emiliano finally spotted a small figure huddled in a dark alley. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized her, Mariana, trembling and drenched from the relentless rain. He slammed on the brakes and jumped out of the car, not caring about the storm that battered him. "Mariana, thank God I found you. I was so afraid I'd lost you," he cried, running toward her. She looked up, fear in her eyes, which quickly turned to relief when she recognized him. "Emiliano, you came for me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible beneath the sound of the rain. Emiliano knelt beside her, wrapping her in his arms without hesitation. "Of course I came, Mariana. I would never leave you. You will never be alone again," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. He picked her up, feeling her tremble, and hurried her into the car. Once inside, he turned up the heat and wrapped her in his dry coat. "Mariana, listen. I don't know if it's a coincidence that you have my Luciana's brooch. We met in high school and we were in love, but when I finished school, my parents sent me abroad, and she broke up with me. She said I had a bright future ahead and didn't want to interfere with my dreams. If your mother was Luciana, I don't know what this means, But what I'm sure of is that since I found you in the streets, in the rain, you'll be like a daughter to me. I will protect you no matter what happens. It doesn't matter if you're my biological daughter. You will be my daughter in my heart." Emiliano held the girl's cold hands between his own, and Mariana's eyes filled with tears. But this time, they were tears of relief and hope. "Do you really want to be my dad?" she asked, her voice soft. Emiliano smiled, his heart filling with warmth, more than anything else in the world. "Yes," he replied. The drive back to the mansion was quiet, but comforting. Mariana felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She quickly fell asleep, completely worn out from the events of the night, while Emiliano drove with newfound determination. When they arrived, Valeria was waiting at the door, her face filled with regret and anxiety. Emiliano carried Mariana into her room, walking past his sister without a word. After making sure Mariana was changed, warm, and fast asleep in her bed, Emiliano went downstairs to confront Valeria. Furious, Emiliano looked at his sister. "How could you just leave a child on the street, Valeria? Mariana is scared and alone. She didn't deserve any of that. She didn't deserve it." Valeria shot back, her voice rising. "No, you don't get it, Emiliano. Do you honestly believe that Mariana just happened to have something that belonged to Luciana? She either stole it or is using it to manipulate you," she shouted. Emiliano clenched his fists, struggling to stay calm. "You don't know that. None of us do. But what I do know is that I'm not going to abandon a child in need because of your paranoia," he replied, his voice thick with anger. Valeria scoffed. "Paranoia? This isn't paranoia. You're letting a beggar ruin everything. She'll take all your money and then disappear." "Enough!" Emiliano yelled. "Mariana stays. She's part of this family now, whether you like it or not. If you can't accept that, then maybe you should leave." Valeria stared at him, shocked. "You're throwing me out for her? A stranger?" Emiliano took a deep breath to calm himself. "I'm not throwing you out, Valeria. I'm giving you a choice. Accept Mariana and treat her with respect, or find somewhere else to live. I won't tolerate this cruelty anymore." Just as the argument reached its peak, neither of them noticed the danger until it was too late. "It smells like something's burning," Valeria suddenly said, realization dawning on her. Before they could react, the sound of breaking glass pierced the air. Flames began to spread quickly through the house, and the heat forced them both to retreat. Emiliano rushed upstairs to find Mariana. "We need to get out of here," Valeria screamed. "I'm going to find Mariana," Emiliano shouted back, not waiting for her to stop him. He dashed back into the burning house. The smoke was thick, making it nearly impossible to see, and the heat was overwhelming. Emiliano covered his face with his sleeve, coughing as he made his way up the stairs. "Emiliano, come out now," Valeria cried from outside, her voice full of panic. Ignoring her, Emiliano pressed on in his desperate search. He knew he was risking his life, but he couldn't leave Mariana behind. Finally, he reached her room, where the fire had already started to lick at the walls. Frantically, he searched the bed until he found Mariana, still asleep and unaware of the fire. He felt a wave of relief as he scooped her up into his arms. "Mariana, wake up. We have to get out of here now," he shouted, holding her tight. "Emiliano, what's happening? Why is there so much smoke?" she asked, trembling in fear. "The house is on fire. We need to leave right now," Emiliano said, trying to keep his voice steady. He ran back into the hallway, now fully engulfed in flames. The heat was unbearable, and the flames were so close. Emiliano did his best to shield Mariana, but the thick smoke made every breath harder to take. They stumbled down the stairs, Emiliano struggling to keep his footing as he carried her. They were so close to the front door now, and Emiliano could hear Valeria screaming outside. Just a few more steps and they would be safe. But the heat and smoke were taking their toll. Just a meter from the exit, Emiliano felt his legs give out beneath him. His vision began to darken, and he stumbled, losing consciousness. "Mariana, run. Get out of here," he gasped, gently placing her on the ground before collapsing. "Papa! Papa! Wake up! I won't leave you!" Mariana cried, kneeling beside him. Outside, through the shattered windows of the house, Valeria saw what was happening and screamed, "Mariana! Get out of there now! Leave him behind! He won't make it!" But Mariana refused to abandon Emiliano. With what little strength she had left, she dragged him toward the door. "I won't leave you, Papa. I'll never leave you," she sobbed, her voice filled with determination. It was a struggle. The weight of Emiliano was too much for her small frame, and the fire was closing in. The heat was overwhelming, but Mariana refused to give up. With one final effort, she managed to pull him outside, both of them collapsing onto the grass of the garden. Valeria rushed toward them, unable to believe what she had just witnessed. Mariana, gasping and coughing, still clung to Emiliano, not letting go even as paramedics arrived. The emergency team rushed to help, while Mariana watched, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. Valeria, breathing heavily, turned from the girl to her brother. The courage Mariana had shown by returning into the fire to save Emiliano stirred something deep inside her. "Mariana, I'm so sorry for everything. Please forgive me," Valeria said, her voice trembling. Mariana cautiously approached, her eyes shifting between Valeria and Emiliano, who was now being treated by paramedics. Valeria reached out and gently cupped Mariana's face. "You didn't run away. You stayed. You saved him. That's real love. The love a family should have," she said, her voice thick with emotion. In the weeks following the fire, Emiliano and Mariana both slowly healed, physically and emotionally. The mansion, though damaged, was eventually rebuilt. But it was no longer a cold, lifeless structure. The walls that had once been decorated with expensive art now displayed Mariana's colorful drawings and photos of their new family. Emiliano cut back on his work hours, choosing to spend more time with his daughter. Together, they explored the city, went on picnics, and enjoyed quiet nights reading stories. Every moment felt precious, a chance to make up for lost time. Mariana thrived under Emiliano's love and care. Her eyes, once filled with fear and uncertainty, now shone with joy and hope. She started attending a local school, making friends and discovering talents she never knew she had. The sound of her laughter filled the house, and Emiliano's heart swelled with pride. Valeria, too, had changed. The traumatic fire and Mariana's bravery had melted the walls around her. She was now a devoted aunt, spoiling Mariana with gifts and sharing funny stories about Emiliano's childhood. One sunny afternoon, the family gathered in the garden of their rebuilt home. Emiliano was grilling while Mariana and Valeria set the table. "Dad, do you think Mom would be happy to see us like this?" Mariana asked, her voice full of warmth. Emiliano paused, a soft smile spreading across his face. "I'm sure she would, sweetheart. She must be looking down on us with that beautiful smile of hers. I believe the miracle of us finding each other has something to do with her. I think she's watching over us." Mariana ran up to embrace him, burying her face in his chest. "I miss her, but I'm so happy to have you and Aunt Valeria now," she murmured. Valeria joined the hug, her eyes glistening with tears. "And we're so happy to have you too, Mariana. You've brought so much light into our lives." As Emiliano looked up at the sky, thinking of Luciana, he whispered a quiet thank you, hoping she could hear it. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of laughter, delicious food, and the warmth of family. That night, as Emiliano tucked Mariana into bed, he smiled at the brooch of Luciana resting on the nightstand. One of the few things that survived the fire, as if it were a sign that nothing could erase the memory of Luciana. "Good night, my love," he said, kissing Mariana's forehead. "Good night, Dad." "I love you," she replied sleepily. "I love you too, more than you know," he said, his heart full. As Emiliano closed the door, he knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, as a family. It was how it was always meant to be. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep bringing you these captivating stories every day. Stay tuned for the next great story coming your way. Thank you for being with us today.